Good morning, viewers. Today, I, Dr. Manjula Mishra, is going to discuss with you why at all are we studying economic growth, which is also known as economic development, as a different branch of study. Friends, up till now you have been studying various principles of economics, and you might be having a doubt that are these principles not enough to explain the working of the economy? Yes, they do. But you also know that economics, when we study it as a principle, makes many assumptions, and these assumptions, they make the study a little bit, you can say that it makes it easier to infer the problems but doesn't explain them in totality. Since these assumptions are not practical, they are not applicable to the real world, so the principle and the practical, it differs a lot in when we come to study the existing problems. So, from the principal world, we are totally switching now to the applications or the subject, how it has to be made applicable to the real world. So, many of the principles which have explained the subject do not explain the happenings in the real world. So, we have to make some relaxations in those principles. We have to make some relaxations to understand the happenings in the real world. So, we have devised a number of other branches to explain you what is actually happening and what happens in the books or as we have been studying it in the principles. So that makes it absolutely necessary, since we cannot have controlled experiments in social science. So we have to study economics in principle as well as the application part. So we are now switching from application part to we are switching from the principle part to the application part, and you will see that many of the things we will have to make many relaxations, many changes in what we have studied as principles of economics. So, to incorporate those changes, we have devised a unique branch in this study, which is known as study of economic growth. Now, there may be a normal query to your minds: why only economic growth? Because the problems of economics are varied. But friends, you would also acknowledge that the problem of economic growth is one where everybody is concerned. Each and every nation is concerned with this problem. Everybody wants to have uh, a higher attainment in terms of gross national product, gross domestic product, per capita income, or whatever parameters we take for the betterment of the country, of the society. We need an answer how to just make it go on making it better and better. So economic growth is an important branch of our field of economics. Its importance can also be seen from the fact that after after various countries started getting independent after the Second World War, the prime concern of these countries was how to harness their resources because they had less resources with them, there was not abundance. Now, economics is a study of scarcity in any case, but the problem with these countries which had received independence at a very later stage, when many of the countries had become developed in comparison to these countries, and we had to attain a pace so that we could catch up with those countries. So, there was another line of thought for these countries, for the economists of these countries, that what should be our strategy to bring our countries abreast with those other countries of the world which were classified as economically developed countries. So we all had to devise certain strategies based on the conditions of our country, of our economy, taking in view our entire resources that could be harnessed for the betterment of the people, betterment of the economy, working of the government, and various other problems. So, the importance of the study of economic growth came to have a pivotal position in the economic study itself. So, along with that, all the other branches of study somehow or the other had to take a path which would ultimately lead to economic growth. It would, if it did not give you an answer of how to get this economic growth to our country, then that principal aspect was getting redundant day by day. So we had to devise other principles, we had to take use of the other principles or devise new principles in order to explain how we can attain a level of growth which was higher than the existing one. So it was not just the problem of one country, it was the problem of many countries which were getting independent. Some got it an year earlier, some got independent an year after, but they were all by and large facing the same problems. So it became very important for the governments, for the economists, for the strategists to devise ways, to suggest ways how to make use of the scarce resources and get better results out of them so that we could use it for the betterment of the people in general. And the policies had to be targeted towards the masses. We had to address a number of problems in this path of our study so that the fruits of development which a country reaps, it reaches to the downtrodden, to the last person of the society, of the economy. So it came, this economic growth gradually came to have the most important position. And friends, I would like to tell you here that of the entire literature that is being produced in economics, maximum of it comes as the study of economic growth, as what leads to economic growth, as what should be the path to economic growth so that the masses can be included, or whatever reasons and whatever ways and means that we could find so that we could lead our economies to the final goal, and that was the betterment of the people so that the production could be increased and we could have a better place in the bargaining with the other countries. So whatever field you can say, be it international economics, be it public economics, be it microeconomics, be it macroeconomics, we had to find a different set of rules altogether to suit the requirements of each and every individual country. So that is how the economics came to have a new branch of study so that the people in general could be benefited from economics. So the political economy got diverted from being a part of social studies to an independent academic branch which would lead the countries to their goals of development. Now, development was primarily concerned with economic development, whether it might have also helped the political development and other courses as well, but primarily the target was economic development, in fact. Now, in the course of this study, I would like to tell you that there is a basic difference between the terms which are used as growth and which are used as development. Friends, though they are used as synonyms, they are basically different. Just a regular rise in national income can be termed as economic growth. This rise has to be a long drawn rise, not a spurious one, like you get a rise in one year and a dip in another year. That would not be classified as economic growth. You need to have a very long term upsurge in the national income figures to say that yes, an economy is on the path of economic growth. So basically, when we were talking of growth, we were concerned with the problems of increasing the national income. But friends, when we talk of development, we have to take many other things also into consideration. And here, uh, here is the point where the economists started differing that growth and development are not synonymous. They have an altogether different connotation as words. Whereas growth was simply addressing the rise in production, the development scenario also took into consideration the change in quality of products, the change in quality of the population, the change in quality of the environment, the change in quality of the overlook of the people. So you can say that development was a more dynamic term than as compared to the growth, because it would take into consideration a lot many other things along with changes in national income. The qualitative changes which would come in the path of economic growth cannot be just sidetracked for increasing for increase in national income, because when we talk of development, there may be phases when we have a dip in the GNP products. There can be, yes. Yes, friend, it's very important to note that there may be periods when the national income figures actually show a decline. But yet, we can say that development is taking place if there are investments in the infrastructure rather than in the productive activities. We would say that yes, the development is taking place. We can say that development is taking place if the production is being diversified. Maybe the production figures dip in terms of money, but since it is being diversified, the production is being diversified, we would say that the nation is developing in spite of the fact that the GNP is not progressing. But in any case, if all the parameters take a dip altogether, then we would not classify it as either growth or development. there are phases in the histories of the nations when we have seen an absolute decline in almost all the parameters, namely GNP, GDP, etc., with various concepts of national income, along with a dip in the general welfare of the people. There is a dip in the climatic conditions of the country. It may become more polluted. There is no improvement in that scenario as well. Then the people are by and large disillusioned with whatever is happening in the country. It would again not come into the purview of economic development or economic growth, and these are the times when a country in isolation or along with the entire world faces certain problems like wars, like you have seen the World War situations during the World War One and World War Two. There wasn't an increase in anything, so there was no growth, there was no development of any sort. So, I would like to contend by saying that there can be economic development in absence of economic growth. It can happen, yes. There may be slowdown of economic growth, and yet we can say that development is taking place. But then all the parameters have to be taken into the consideration. If other parameters are progressing, we can say that the economic development is taking place. And the first and foremost condition of economic development is well-being of the masses. So if countries are spending more on education, on health, on human resource development and things like that, we may see an initial decline in the rate of economic growth. But since the well-being is increasing, we can say that a nation is developing in spite of the fact that growth is declining. So, we now understand what is the basic difference between growth and development. I would still like to tell you that by and large, we do use these two terms as synonyms. They are by and large synonyms. Now, next thing that comes into discussion, which you should be paying attention to, is there any difference between underdeveloped countries, less developed countries, and developing countries? Well, friends, though many of the books that you will consult will treat them as synonyms, again, just like growth and development, they may be treated, these three terms may be treated as synonyms, but again there is an underlying differences which, as a student of economics, and specifically as a student of economic development, you should understand. And this is a very underlying difference which you should always keep in mind, though some authors are using them as a synonym, as similar, and they are being used one in place of the other. So friends, whereas underdeveloped countries, they show a totally gloomy situation of a country, a stagnant situation where there is absolutely no development, that may be known as underdeveloped. It is underdeveloped as it is having a very, very low level of development. That is, you can say that people are just able to somehow satiate their basic needs. Some are not even able to satiate their basic needs as well. So the population is in utmost poverty. They are not getting 2 square meals, they are not getting enough clothes to wear, they are not having proper houses to live. Moreover, they are not having a rightful source to income. They are having no earning, they are having no resources, so they cannot earn anything. So, friends, when we talk of underdeveloped countries, it gives a scenario of a stagnant economy which has almost negligible resources, and there is no way towards development as well. When we talk of less developed countries, or LDCs as they were addressed as, UDCs, from UDCs to LDCs, a slightly more respectable word was given to these countries, from underdeveloped to less developed countries. Now, again, these less developed countries did have some resources, they did have some growth, they did have some positive thing to look for, whereas the underdeveloped countries were totally devoid of these things. So gradually they were categorized as less developed countries, and from less developed countries, the term has taken a dynamic measure, and that has led itself to be classified as developing countries. It gives a more respectable term to these countries which were independent after the Second World War. They were all hitherto being colonies of some or the other nation, but now, since they were independent, they wanted respect for themselves, and since they were planning for themselves, they were taking account of their resources, of how they could manage their resources. So they were all trying to use their resources to proper channels, and the term came to be changed to developing countries. Now, again, the world now is divided into developing countries and developed countries. Developed countries are those which have attained a minimum level of development in terms of per capita income. Developing countries are those which are yet to get to that point. They have not reached that point as yet. So, this is how the world was divided into two halves, not exactly halves also, yes, but in two parts, the developing countries and the developed countries.